Welcome to Boost Denver. Oh man, I do this sometimes. Today, our Shawn McBride of McBride For Business presents the 3 laws of empowerment. How about a brief bio? It's impressive. Our Shawn McBride is a corporate business attorney, author, CPA, CEO, consultant, and speaker. Our Shawn McBride is the CEO and Chief Innovation Officer at McBride For Business, LLC, and a managing member of the R. Shawn McBride Law Firm. He speaks to audiences and works directly with business owners on setting their companies up for success, helps establish systems and procedures related to the ownership of the company in order to prepare the company for future growth. He spoke at TEDx Topeka this year. His keynote speech is the 3 Laws of Empowerment. His book, Business Blunders, covers issues commonly seen in business. With rousing applause, please help me welcome R. Shawn McBride.
So I reached out and I felt my father's lump there. And in that moment, everything changed. Suddenly I was going to doctor's appointments. I was up late at night reading medical journals, trying to understand this obscure terminology that doctors would use. And I was meeting with my mother about how would we keep things moving forward. It was certainly a tough time for my business. And I had all because just before this, my parents had moved from Maryland to Florida, and I promised to help them, and I spent a lot of weekends and some weekdays and a lot of travel back and forth between those states and my home location in Dallas, helping them move. And right after they moved, my father got cancer. And it disrupted my business. But thankfully, I've been working for years with other people and their businesses and their plans. It made me wonder, why do some businesses go through multiple disruptions and come out the other side successful, and other businesses go through a similar time or period and they fail, they shut their doors, and it's over? And the key is the central business plan. What do you have going on in the business? How are you operating the business? Now, you've heard some about my background. I'm a lawyer by training, CPA, studied accounting, then went to law school. And so I've always worked with business owners on building and executing their plans, which taught me a lot. And I spent years at some of the largest law firms in the country, but I really started learning when I built my own business, right? Because all that theoretical stuff goes out the door. You have to do it, and you have to become multidisciplinary, as we all know that. But I kept working with my clients and trying to figure out how could I simplify it, how could I make it work easier. So I share a lot of commonalities with many of you. I know several of you are speakers and other people that work with people on the business plans, and really I've spent so much of my time just trying to business planning is overwhelming to most business owners. It's something they don't want to go through. It takes a lot of time, and it just saps their energy. Who wants to get up on Saturday mornings and do a business plan? No hands. Every once in a while I get a hand, but not today. Right? I mean, it's just not something people look forward to. It's usually a dreaded exercise in your business. But nothing can open more value in your business than having an effective business plan. So that's why I talk about this topic. And then there's other things you can do within your business plan to make it more effective. But you've got to have that core plan. And usually people are so afraid of starting on business planning that they ignore it or they put it off to the side, get caught up in the hustle and bustle of the day-to-day, and time slips by and they wonder why their business is not getting where they want to go. And if one of those unfortunate disruptions would happen, like what happened to my father, the business is not systematized, doesn't have a clear plan, it's very important, and it simply just vanishes. So I want to build business plans that are better, and that's where the 3 laws of empowerment come in here. Now, I know several of you are looking for a legal speech, and I'm going to bring legal undertones into everything I do. As many I have come from my practice and experience as a lawyer, because that's how I interface with business plans through the first part of my career. was people would come to me, they would be executing something in their business, and I would come in as a lawyer to document it, to carry it out, and to make sure. And that taught me all the failure points, right? Because as a lawyer, you're looking for the business plans and what and that's my first book, Business Blunt, was a are we going to work our way from here to there? We know where we are. We know where we want to be in 10 years after we build that vision. What steps will we have to take to do that? We're breaking this very, very incrementally. A, D-R-E, evaluate what changes need to happen. This is often the hardest step of the three.
What was the R?
Related to steps. So you got your dream, you got your vision, now you lay the steps. Now E, we're evaluating what changes need to be made. This is often the hardest part. If you are capable of doing what you need to do to be where you want to be from 10 years from now, you'd probably be there already, right? If you had those skills and capabilities and could structure your life in a way to live that life of your dreams, you'd probably already be there. So we have to make changes. What improvements do we need to make? What new skills do we need to pick up? What people do we need to associate to build the plan to get us where we want to go? A, adjust. Once you do that, once you look at where you are, where you want to be, and look at these changes that need to be made, and timeline's probably not going to fit. That 10-year vision may not be exactly right. You may have to re-incremental this thing to make it realistic to happen. And then M is modify, which is once you're out of the gate, once you start executing this plan's going for a long period of time, you'll want to modify your plan with the reality of what happens. I know in my own plans, I know in the plans of my clients, what so often happens is things happen on different timelines than what we anticipated. Some things will happen quicker than you thought, some things will take longer than you thought. So you're going to have to constantly go back and readdress your plan, at least every 6 months, definitely every year. You want to go back, look at your long-range plan, look at that vision. For some people, the vision will change over time, right? As you learn and you grow as a human being and you get more experiences in life, your vision of where you want to go may change. So that's going to change some fundamentals in your plan. But also, as you're developing and working through your plan in a timeline, in the real world, things happen in unpredictable order. You know, some things will develop quicker than others, some things will develop slower. Sometimes you'll get an amazing customer early in the life cycle of your business. Sometimes you have to fight and fight and fight to get that. So you want to constantly be looking at your plans in light of how it's developing. So that gets you a great first draft of your business plan, right? And that's a simple process. Does that seem overwhelming to anyone to go through that exercise? Right? I mean, we've just taken something that many people are afraid of and made it into many bite-sized steps that you can easily do. But that's just you. How do we make the plan really great? Well, I've come up with a process for that, too. And that's that next acronym down there called WINS. And that's going to start getting us moving towards where we want to go to make this plan even stronger. So we came up with a first draft by ourselves. Now we're going to put the plan in writing. That's the W in WINS, right? You want to write that plan down. And writing the plan down does a couple of things. First, it forces you to do some rigor of thinking, right? Anybody been through that? It sounds like you may have, right? You have written something down and then you start seeing there's more details you missed. You have to fill some stuff in.
Yeah, through the lean canvas.
Yeah.
It breaks it down by all this.
What's this? What's the tool?
It's called lean canvas.
Okay. And so this is a planning tool that you've used?
Yeah, you can, and it's free to download if anybody likes. It's called linkstack.com.
Okay.
So
there you go. One-page business plan, right? And that's at the top level.
To get started.
Well, yeah, and you should think of this in levels too, right? You know, to have a full, complete business plan, you're going to need more than a page.
Right.
But almost like one of those outlines, exploding outline, you should have a simple one-page version of your plan that you can explain to anybody, and then you could have more detailed versions. They should all interlink and be consistent with each other. But that's great. You know, you have a tool to write it down. And so when you write it down, what was your experience? How did
It becomes clear, like it helps you clarify, you know, who your customers are, what your threats are, where your opportunities are.
It forces you to think about this stuff to get it written down. So a lot of you were interested in legal. The other thing we find in legal when we write things down is it forces people's clarity of thought when we have multiple people involved. Because when people are speaking to each other, it's not uncommon for people to think they have an understanding. But then when you write it down, they often differ in some of the details. You're laughing. You've seen this?
Well, I used to run management meetings, and people would say, no, this is what we talked about. So I started to do, sorry for the ageism, Polaroids of the whiteboard, and I'd send out to everybody saying, this is what we covered. And then I started to record the meeting so that,
Well, our human recollections are not great, right? There's been studies with criminal acts and, recollections of the witnesses and everything else. Our minds are terrible for remembering details, actually. But beyond that, so often when I work with business partners, or people who have been in business deals before, they say stuff to each other, but they attach different meanings. Somebody says we're going to do a social media campaign, and to one person that means we're going to put some random post on Facebook, and the other person that means we're going to go hire an expert and we're going to be on all the major channels, right? They said the same words, but they attach different meaning to it. And this happens a lot, which is why writing is so valuable. It's going to force you to think through things. And if there's other people involved in your business plan, it's going to force them to think through things.
the other thing I used is mind maps.
Yeah.
And it forced, I do it in handwriting first on a whiteboard.
Yep.
And then can transfer it electronically. There's just something about using your hand to put it out there.
Yes.
That actually causes a lot of additional items, and you don't have to worry about the techie stuff.
Right. And I see many of you are handwriting. There's been studies out there too that handwriting stuff does help our memory retention and it helps our thinking process. So it's a good thing. So we write the business plan down, forcing our clarity of thought. If we have others involved, forcing us to agree. Then we want to involve somebody else in the plan. Once we've written the plan down, now we want to show it to somebody. Show and tell time. I, that's involved. I is involved, yes. Now you don't have to go out and find a business guru. You don't have to find a high-priced business coach at this stage. You want another smart, rational thinking person that you can show your business plan to. You're going to ask them some questions about your business plan. Do not ask them, do you like my business plan? Because what do you think they're going to say? I like your business plan. It's lovely. You need to ask them real questions. And usually the best way to drill this is through specifics. What did you like about my business plan? Do you think this business plan is realistic? What things do you think I didn't put in my business plan? So I don't have a comprehensive list for you today, but the point is you want to get into a conversation with them. And you want to really ask the people who are reviewing your business plan for their input. And all of that's going to lead to a new draft. So you're going to rewrite your business plan at this point. After you get one person's input, figure out what's authentic to you, what's not authentic to you, and do a new draft. You're going to go back through and update it based on their feedback. And then the second N is new input. Now you can either go back to that first person again, or you can go to a different person, but you want to get additional input on your business plan to make sure it's really strong. And the more people you show it to, the more holes you're going to fix. Now eventually you're going to start getting conflicting advice, because that's the real world. And at some point you got to say what's authentic to you, what's not authentic to you. So you get to make a judgment call with all the input. You own the business. You're the business person. So you get to decide what input you take and what input you don't take. But don't skip the step of getting other people's ideas, because you want them really to find the holes, the weak spots, and things that you didn't think about. Because we as humans all have blind spots. We have things that we don't think about, things that we don't realize, areas that we're not as familiar with, and we need to go back to and make sure that we get right. Now, in the legal part of this, one of the big questions people come up with me is, what about non-disclosure agreements? What about confidentiality, right? If you've got some piece of technology or some chemical formula or something that is so novel that it can't be done by anybody, that is so novel and you don't want to copy, then yes, you really need to be thinking about that. If it's your plan to be a consultant where your energy is the main thing, if you're going to go out and start a social media business, if you're going to start an expert, if you're going to be writing books and doing expert marketing, at that point, what's valuable is you, right? Your knowledge, your information. So they can't copy it anyway. So a lot of people get a little too carried away with the NDAs and getting the legal documents signed up. And hopefully it's somebody you trust, right? I mean, when I work with the young startup companies, which isn't that often for me, but when I do, we have to go out and interface with investors. And there's always a dance. You have to show the investors some information about your company to get them interested before they'll sign an NDA to go to the next level. So you're always risking a little bit. That's just the reality of business. You're going to have to show a little bit of your confidential information. So don't get too carried away with it. Work with somebody you trust. Show your business plan to people you believe in. Particularly if it's somebody that's busy and they've already got their own business. I mean, what's the odds of them saying, oh, I'm going to drop my business, I'm going to go steal your idea? It's possible, especially if your idea is amazing, but in the real world, most of the time, that's not going to happen. So let's put a dose of reality in there. And then the S in wins is occasionally you need to start over. You need to go back and rework that plan from top to bottom. So we spent a lot of time in law number 1, preparation. Let's move into law number 2. The law of planning. This is where we start putting that plan in action. Now, as a speaker, I get to meet a lot of people. People come up to me after I speak and talk to me, and I encourage you to do so. I love meeting people and hearing what everybody's doing. And every once in a while, you remember one particular person who came to you because they had a particularly memorable story. And one particular evening in Austin, Texas, I spoke in a basement of a building, very narrow ceiling. And this gentleman came up to me and said, I spent 5 years working in this business partnership, and now my business partners have frozen me out. They're not going to pay me anything for my 5 years of work. And I said, where's your written agreement? Well, we don't really have a written agreement. Felt very bad for this gentleman. Very, very bad. But that is one of the realities that happens, unfortunately, when you don't have a proper plan. Here this guy went in with a group of partners, put a significant portion of his life into a business. And his partners went a different direction. Because there's no written documentation or anything else, he's in a very bad position. I never talked to the guy again. But I assume he still hasn't gotten his money for his 5 years of labor. So we have to take business planning very seriously. We have to take these dreams and visions, which I think are critically important, and start transferring them into plans that protect us. And over the course of my career, I've developed a checklist for looking for issues in plans. And it's what I call the 4 Ds. These are 4 things that every plan needs to be tested against in order for it to be successful. Number 1, death. What happens if somebody dies in the plan? Because everything changes. I've had business partnerships where one of the partners dies, right? And then what happens? Well, usually unless you do something special, under state law, the interests are going to pass to a spouse or the children. Now you've got new business partners. Congratulations. I've heard of a spouse of a deceased partner coming in and asking where her office was because she's now a partner. Awkward. So we need to have a plan for what happens with death. If it's just you and your business, how do you transfer that economic value that you created to whoever your heirs are? But if you're in a business partnership with other people, what happens in the dynamics if the other partners aren't there? This is something that's not very hard to plan for in advance, but it's very difficult to deal with after the fact. So have a discussion, get some documentation in place, make sure you understand what's going to happen to that business in the event that something happens to one partner. Number 2, disability. What happens if somebody's unable to work in the business? This happens, right? Unfortunately. If you look at the Social Security statistics, they tell me if I look at a 20-year-old today, 1 in 5 chance that they'll be disabled before they exit the workforce. So 1 in 5 people are going to become disabled and unable to finish their career. And what happens in your business partnership or your business agreement with your most important vendor or your strategic joint venture partner, your co-branding partner? What happens if one of you becomes disabled? How do you continue the payment? Right? Because you put work and time and effort into your business up to that point, so there's probably some payment owed for that. Plus, the disabled person typically needs income and medical bills and other things. But the business often has to hire somebody new to come in to fill that role because the person can no longer fill it. So we need to have a comprehensive plan of what we're going to do in the event of a disability. Now, the first 2 Ds often can be covered by insurance pretty easily. Death and disability insurance are commercially available. One thing you can't get insurance for is divorce. But that can change some odd dynamics in the business. I've had many business owners come to my office, particularly business partners, where after a divorce, the dynamics changed. And there was a new partner. One of my clients owned a business, and his partner was great, provided him a lot of information about the business, was really accountable, did a good job running the business, and then his partner got divorced. And in divorce proceedings, his partner's wife got ownership of the business. Yes. And then he started asking for the same information he was getting. What about those quarterly reports you were giving me? What about those nice updates on our income and our profitability? No reports, no information. Meanwhile, the partner had signed a multi-million-dollar personal guarantee for the real estate owned by the company. Very, very uncomfortable situation because they didn't build provisions into their agreements to deal with the reality of divorce. So we've got to build something for that. 4th D, disagreement. What happens if the partners disagree with one another? What happens if, even beyond a partnership and a contract, what if you have a disagreement with a vendor? How are you covering your business if any strategic contract, if there's a disruption in it, if there's a disagreement with that person, how do you keep your business moving forward beyond that event? In the partnership context, which is where I often work, we build a buyout provision. One partner buys the other out to keep the business alive. I'd rather have one partner buy the other partner out than have everybody spend all their money at the courthouse paying for lawyers to find out there's no economic value left. And that has happened to many businesses. Once they start disagreeing, then they keep disagreeing, then they end up in a courthouse. And what's unique about me is often the business partners that show up at my office tell me that they never get into a disagreement with their partner. We've known each other for 20 years. We've known each other since college. Let's not worry about a disagreement because we won't disagree with each other. But we don't know what the business world's going to bring us. We may get an acquisition offer. We may have a change in circumstances. The market may change around us. We don't know what external factors are going to cause a disagreement. And most of the time when I find business partners disagreeing, it's because something changed in one of the partners' lives. Something significant. A divorce, child being born, something happening to one of their children becoming adults. Some major life event happens. and then that person's perspective on the business and their life changes. So we know these realities can happen. Why don't we face it and start planning for it and deal with the fact that we could disagree with our business partner? We could disagree with that strategic person who we're doing a project with. Let's just talk ahead of time about what we're going to do if we disagree. So we've prepared and we've planned. Now we want to protect the business. That's the third law, is the law of protection. Making sure we get what's fair and right. We're going to put a lot of time and effort into these businesses. They often become part of us. They express our identity. The brand expresses who we are. How are we going to make sure that we get what's fair and right at the end of the day? How are we protected? And that's where a lot of the legal stuff comes in, too. Do we have written agreements with everybody, making sure everything's clear? Do we have proper insurance in place to make sure if something bad happens that we've got protections for that? Are we making sure that we've got the intellectual property protections or other things that we need to make sure that other people don't circumvent our business? The way you protect each business will be unique. It really is a facts and circumstances thing. But what I don't want people doing is just getting the business started, building a good plan, starting to make money, and not thinking about that next step of how do I make sure I keep that wealth I've accumulated? How do I pass that to the future generation? One group of my clients is family businesses. I get a lot of businesses that are built by an entrepreneur or a couple of entrepreneurs together. And now with the way our demographics are changing, we have a lot of these people that are maturing and they're getting to the point where they're starting to think about retirement or when they won't be in the business anymore. And unfortunately, one of the things we've learned in recent years is because the way our society's changed, a lot of times the children no longer want the business. 20 or 30 years ago, there was almost no question, right? Parents had a successful business. Something happened to the parents, they retire, they die. The children almost always wanted to take over the business. Now, more and more, we're seeing children say, I don't want that lifestyle. You know, mom and dad worked around the clock to keep that business going. I'm not doing that. Or because of health advances and other things going on, you know, maybe the parents worked into their late 60s or 70s. The children already have a career. They have children of their own. They have a house in another city. They don't want to leave whatever they've got going to go run the business. So many of the simplistic business planning we did before no longer works with the modern generations. And sometimes we have situations with multiple children where one of the children wants to be in the business and the other children don't want to be in the business. It happens. So we need to work through scenarios. So when we're dealing with family businesses, we talk to them about which children actually want to be involved in a business, which children don't want to be involved in a business. How do we make this equitable when we pass the business from the parents to the children? If one child wants to be involved and the other two don't, well, guess what? The one brother or sister might be working for his other kids because they're the financial investors, right? This is causing some new dynamics in the family that we need to talk about and work through. On the partnership side, what happens when one of the partners wants to exit the business or retire or change their time allocation to the business? One of the partnerships I have, great business, two guys running it, working a lot of hours, and one of them, and they both at about the same time got approached by their spouses saying that they were working too many hours in the business. And one of them said, you know what, you're right, I'm going to cut my hours back. And the other guy said, you know what, I love the business, I'm going to double down. What happens between these two partners when they're splitting everything 50-50, and one of them now suddenly wants to work around the clock and the other one wants to take a bunch of time off? Very, very tense situation between those partners. all could have been avoided by building some foresight into it and saying, hey, life might change. What are we going to do if one of us wants to work more hours than the other? How will we make this fair for each other? How can we make this equitable? They didn't have that conversation up front, and they ended up in a very awkward situation at the end. So the point of preparation is, or protection, is looking to the future and what the future is going to look like to make sure we have it right. So 3 laws we covered here today. Prepare. That's getting a strong vision, knowing where we're going. It's never too late. If you're already in your business, stop. Do a new vision and then start adjusting to it. The dream system will get you to where you want to go. You can start wherever you are now to wherever you want to be. Number 2, get a strong plan. Build that plan and look for those common error points and mistakes we see. And number 3, protect yourself. Make sure you understand how that's all going to work and how it's all going to come together. It's a very simple process for you guys. It's something you can start building now as you go forward to make sure that you are doing the things you need to do. So I think we're just about ready. Just about right. So I'll be available for some questions and everything afterwards. If anybody has something you want to bring up or whatever, I'd be glad to talk with you and let you know what you need. I'd love to get your feedback on my presentation and what you need and if I addressed your key points. So,
Question.
Yes.
How do you overcome the human factor of sitting down and having these discussions?
Either you need mature partners. So some of my best clients are second and third time business owners because they can sit down with each other and talk realistically about this because they've had these past experiences and they know these things happen in business. The other thing you do is have facilitated discussion. That's actually something I've done for some of my clients, but you don't have to hire me. You get somebody who understands this dynamic that's not directly in the transaction that can facilitate it. I can move partnership discussions very fast by coming in as an outside facilitator. I come in, I talk to people, I say what these situations are, I make them talk about the issues. That way there's a lot less dancing around. So you've got kind of a checklist now that you can use, death, disability, divorce, disagreement, to go back to facilitate discussion. Or if you can't facilitate it because of the dynamics, bring somebody in from the outside that's not directly in the transaction, and they can move the ball forward for you. But you've got to get people thinking about these things. You know?
A lot of startups don't want to think about that. A lot of startup individuals.
Yes, and what unfortunately happens with many startups is, particularly we have a startup partnership, they start up, they get it, if they get successful, they have a big fight, it destroys it, and then they know what to do the second time around. It's just expensive tuition. I'd really prefer to avoid that, but that is the reality of what happens a lot of times. Some firms don't want to put the time into it at the beginning. They have to wait until they get burned once. Once they get burned the first time, they don't want to stick their hand on the stove the second time. So, you know, I've told you about my career. You know, I went the wrong direction for a long period of time because I didn't have the intentionality, I didn't have the planning to it. Now I've got the intentionality, I've got the plan, and people, you know, look at what I'm doing and they're like, wow, you know, this is amazing what you do. You get to go out and speak to people, you get to work with business owners, get brought in on interesting issues. I saw this 5 years ago. I knew where I was going. I didn't know exactly how it would be. I didn't know I'd be standing in this room today at this time. But I knew I'd be talking to audiences, and I knew I'd be interfacing with people. I know I'd be helping people. I saw this before it happened. So what visions do you have? Where can you see yourself? So if you can see it, you can get there. And now you have the tools to do that. So thank you. You've been a wonderful audience.